Hi, everybody. My name is Claudia DeLuna, and I'm so pleased to be here speaking to you at DevNet Create 2020. I'm going to be telling you and taking you actually on a bit of a journey about a chatbot. So thanks for hanging out with me for the next 20 minutes to discuss chatbot technology and how it can help you basically have a teammate that never sleeps. There's a bio page that the DevNet Create people have put together. And so if you want to find out any details about myself, about my career, how to get a hold of me, please go ahead and check out the details there. I have been in the networking industry for some time. And for the last 6 years, I've really focused on automation. I'm also fortunate enough to have 3 repositories accepted into DevNet's Code Exchange. So if you're interested in checking out some of those things, please go to Code Exchange. There's all manner of good things there. And the demo that we'll do today in this session will actually, I hope, also be accepted into Code Exchange. Speaking about DevNet for a moment, I do want to highlight what an amazing resource I think this is for us. It's really a differentiator in my mind across the vendors of networking equipment. The ability to immediately test something out, a bit of code, how a particular operating system works, essentially on a device that's always on the internet is tremendous. As I started out in kind of my own automation journey, spending so much time trying to figure out how to come up with a lab environment when really what I wanted to be doing was coding, putting together scripts. So this resource is invaluable. And like I said, really, really a differentiator, particularly the always-on sandboxes. And if you've run across any of my offerings, you'll see that I make extensive use of those always-on sandboxes, and we'll do the same here as well. I also look at it as a bit of a forecaster, a bit of a litmus test into maybe what I should be looking into, and oftentimes what I should be studying. And the means to study it is, in many cases, already available to me on DevNet. And DevNet Create is just an extension of that tremendous resource, so that we can take all of our coding, all of our scripts, to the next level. And that's actually been my personal goal for this year, is to take all of my scripts and start thinking about how to make them more resilient, how to make it easy for people to run my scripts, and just become a better coder, so that these scripts can be used on a day-to-day basis operationally, perhaps even in a CI/CD pipeline. And that's actually one of the reasons I wanted to do this session on chatbots. So I always work best when I focus on the problem. It kind of gives you a good level of clarity, right? So what problem was I trying to solve? Well, the problem really was information. Not necessarily having the information. Oftentimes we've got the information, but it's not readily available. It's not there when it's needed, or it's not packaged in the right way. And this really started hitting home for me when I was involved in a global network refresh last year. We were essentially refreshing on the order of 100 sites across the world. We had teams in the Americas, in EMEA, in Asia Pac, and at any given time, people needed information. And obviously, the time zones did not work for us. You had the typical one-day delay or one-day lag for getting stuff, because everything was really being built out of North America. So that problem of trying to get the right information to the right people really reared its head over and over and over again. And it really hit home with me when one of the project managers in one of the other regions, I honestly think he had a bot, because no matter what, 7 a.m. every day, I'd get the same questions. And it's not that those questions couldn't be answered by looking at our status boards. We had an extensive setup for reporting progress. We had to report progress to the client on a weekly basis. The machine to report progress was large. And so that data was there, but this particular project manager, I guess, didn't want to poke through the data. And after thinking about it and seeing this pattern develop, I can't say that I blamed him. I did blame him for asking me the same question every day at 7 a.m., which actually he was on the East Coast. So for me, that was 4 a.m. So yes, my household was thrilled with the 4 a.m. wake up call, should I have forgotten to put all of my devices to sleep. And so I was pretty motivated to figure out a way to deal with that. And then, like I said, I started seeing this pattern emerge of information at the right time, packaged in the right way. Packaged for the audience is really the way to say it, because same kind of pattern cropped up internally. We had technical teams all over the place, even within regions. The travel was extensive, and so they're getting on planes, but they need to essentially get this bit of information to share with a client. And it was just very difficult to sift through kind of the documentation packages that we had. There was also kind of other activities that got very difficult to do when we were in the thick of it, and we had maybe 5 or 6 sites going on in a week. And once we got the initial bot out to everybody, this thing sort of took a life of its own. And we'll get to that, where we started doing checks to make sure that we weren't going to step on things when we did actual migrations. And then, as it turns out, the client needed information, but in a very specific way. Other client technical teams wanted information, like what were all the subnets that were going to be presented for this particular site. And of course, I mentioned the global aspect. We needed all this information all the time, readily available at the drop of a hat. Oftentimes, the requests for these informations would be coming from a meeting that the teams were having in the region. They couldn't answer right away. They'd email the core team in North America. So there's that day's lag, if you will. By the time we got the answer, it just wasn't as efficient as it could be. So thinking about that problem, one of the things that we found, and it's pretty common, I think, is that there seems to be a lot of inertia sometimes with adoption. And so in the past, we had tried basically sending out executables of our scripts so that the regional teams could execute them, and it never really caught on. So in thinking about the problem, what we needed was something that would be easy to adopt. Even better, something that everybody had already adopted. And for this project, we were a huge WebEx and WebEx team shop. So that was our collaboration tool of choice. We did WebEx meetings, we did WebEx Teams. We actually had a WebEx Teams space for every site that we did. So on the order of 100 WebEx Team spaces, so that we would focus, the information for that site. And everybody already knew that there was a web client. There were desktop applications for all the desktops that we used. And we got a mobile app in there as well. So I could leverage the power of WebEx Teams on the back end for a bot that seems to solve my adoption problem. We've already talked about the immediacy aspect of it. So the information was most valuable when given right when somebody asked for it. Self-service was another big component. I mentioned that what would tend to happen is there would be a meeting in one of the other regions. There would be an email sent to the core team in North America. There'd be a day lag, and then the core team would put together the information and send it back out. Well, again, not very efficient. So that self-service component really came into play. And like DevNet sandboxes, the always-on sandboxes, it just needed to be available. Again, all these things are just, I think, different ways of saying, that immediacy component was really, really crucial to the solution. So let's take a look at the bot in action. The production bot obviously has a lot of proprietary information in it, but what I've done here is I've extracted out kind of the basic functionality of what we did. It's a little bit of a kitchen sink of tools and capabilities. So you can kind of see the things we did, the type of things that we did. So for us, time zones, like I mentioned, were really, really important. And the ability to just quickly query, what time is it here? What time is it there? That was really a critical function. And it was so easy to implement because we just hit a REST API and got back maybe not just the time, but the date, and maybe a few other bits of information that wound up being handy for us on the project. So hitting an API for time, hitting an API for status. We had a cloud-based project management capability, but I'm a big fan of Cisco ACI. And so I thought to model kind of hitting that REST API for status, I would show you how to hit the always-on APIC on DevNet and get the Fabric health score and get a listing, at least the top listings of faults in the ACI Fabric. And then you've got that request for information, right? I need to know what subnets are at the site and package properly. So one of the interesting things that happened is I knew I could build something to present all the subnets that needed to be advertised out of that site. And so I thought, this is great. There was a kind of a companion SD-WAN initiative going on kind of around the same time as ours. And so occasionally we would have to give them a report of the subnets at the site. And I figured SD-WAN, that team's all over automation. And so initially I did a report where I would dump out all the subnets in a JSON file and ship it over to them. And the first response I got was not good. I thought I was being oh so clever. They're like, what is this? No, we just want a list. So then I did two different reports. I did a CSV report, and then I did basically a markdown report in PDF, thinking there was no way they were actually going to use that, but that's the one they preferred. So I tell you that long story because it's really, they wanted to see the information in a particular way, and it was so easy for us to give it to them that way. We had the data, we just had to package it properly, and then we had to make the means of making that report available to all of the program managers and engineers in the regions available, and that's what WebEx Teams did for us. And then, just because we could, I threw in there a little widget that basically gave you a comic strip in case the day was going crazy and you needed a laugh. So again, these are silly examples in some regards, but they show you the functionality, and it's kind of all over the place, right? We've talked about REST APIs and really any kind of API. We talked about hitting a Cisco APIC, about Markdown and turning it into a PDF report. We'll show you in a minute. One of the things I did is I generated basically a graph of the interfaces on the device in real time. So let's take a look at that. Here's the WebEx Teams application. There's also, as you know, a web-based version of this. And there's a mobile app version for it as well. So anything anybody wanted to use, and everybody already had access to all of these. So just from that adoption perspective, it was really powerful to be able to deliver this functionality through WebEx Teams and the chatbot. So, and of course we had to make it easy to use, right? It's already kind of easy to use because you're just talking to the bot the way you would talk to one of your teammates. Actually, let me go into so I have a testing room, as you can see, but I'm going to go into the general room and just type in the name of the bot itself. And it'll tell you a couple of bits of information. It knows who you are. So it knows that I'm Claudia DeLuna. It knows what room I'm in. You can see that here I'm in the DevNet Create chatbot. And it gives you a little bit of a hint to how to proceed. So let's run the help. And you'll be able to see the different functions that I kind of alluded to in the previous slide. So you can see our ACI query. It's always a good idea, I find, to give yourself a way to look at what's happening on the back end when you're working with bots. So there's this debug data option that you can do. Sometimes you have to figure out what you're typing in looks like to the bot. So this echo, this actually, I believe, came from Hank Preston, because the underlying modules used for this are both the WebEx Team SDK as well as a module that Hank Preston put together that makes it effortless to put together this little menu of options. There's the greeting, which you you've already seen, help, which you've already seen. Let's take a look at time. So at any moment, if anybody needed to find out what the time was on the East Coast, this is going out to an external API, and you can see I get the time zone, the current time, the current day, which when you're in a global environment or in a global deployment is pretty important as well. The UTC offset actually helps with configurations, so that's why that's there. And then we did a lot with week numbers. So we presented the week number as well. Let's take a look at the layer 3 summary report. And here you want to give it a device name. So I'm going to cheat. And you can see here, I'm going to do this against the Sandbox NXOS device. But obviously in production, when we would do something like this, we would go out and give it the name of the particular core switch. If we couldn't get to it, we actually kept show commands available, so we could actually just part static show commands. So you can see here, put together a little diagram. Shows you the different interfaces and then lists them out for you. So this is the kind of information that some of our coordinators were being asked on meetings. Normally, they'd have to check in with the North America team or sift through a bunch of data that was in our kind of the documentation packages. This way they had it available to them right away. Let's take a look at the ACI functions because I thought these were pretty amazing. And this gives you maybe some ideas on kind of operational aspects you could do with bots. So we're going to do ACI help. And this particular command actually has two components. It'll give you just the data that you wanted, the minimum, maximum, and average health score of the current. This is the DevNet APIC that's always on. Or you can actually do ACI health in debug mode. And this one's interesting because it'll give you the report, but it'll also give you the raw data that it got back from the APIC, the IAM data. You can see all the other different options that were returned. And then if we take a look at the fault status, this will give you a sense of some of the reports that we did. You could very easily put this into a markdown report. You can see it's listing the first 15. There are 30 total, and you get the fault ID, kind of the name of that fault, and some descriptive information about the fault. So quick and dirty little demo about the various functionality. Let's take a look at the back end. So decomposing the bot. It can seem a little complicated, but it's really pretty simple when you think about it. We've already talked about the messaging client providing desktop, web, and mobile application UIs for people to use. If you're already a WebEx team user, you have adoption. You don't even have to worry about that. The backend messaging platform is where the magic really starts to happen in terms of provisioning of this bot. So you need a space, right? The bot is like one of your teammates. You add the bot to your spaces. You have to create a bot and a webhook. The webhook will actually talk to a web server. In this case, for this demo, the web server is actually on Google Cloud Platforms. And it's pretty simple. It's an Ubuntu Bionic system. It's got Nginx for the web server, and it's got just a very basic Flask application. The magic begins with your code. The modules I mentioned already that we're using, Hank Preston's WebEx Teams bot, really simplifies things. And then the WebEx Teams SDK. Then your scripts to do whatever you want. You may already have some of these scripts built. And so all you're doing is, instead of maybe putting them in an XC, you're front-ending them with an interface all your teammates already know how to use. So you have the functionality that you've already built, and you've just distributed it out to everyone that needs it. And then, of course, I mentioned already, I'm hitting various APIs, time API. In the production environment, we were hitting the API of our statusing system. Here we did the APICs. So let's conclude with just a few thoughts. I hope I've shown you kind of the strength and the capabilities that you can obtain by leveraging your messaging platforms like WebEx Teams to get people exactly the data they want exactly when they want it, and in the format and in the package that they need it in. That's going to improve not just your efficiency, allow you to scale, but really it makes the data that you already have so much more valuable and so much more relevant. Thank you so much for spending this time with me.